Welcome to Meet the Candidates here on WCMU. I'm David Nicholas, and we welcome as our guest Paul Whitney as the Democratic candidate for Michigan's open 97th House District. This is also with redrawn lines, and it covers now portions of Saginaw, Tuscola, and Genesee counties, also the city of Auburn in Bay County. Paul, thanks very much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, David.
Let's begin first in our first minute or so with a little bit of background about you, your hometown, the experience you bring to this campaign.
David, I live in the city of Vassar. I've born and raised here in Vassar. I've worked both of my careers here, raised my children, and intend to run for the 97th district. So I'm a product of the 97th district. Went to public high school here, public college at Delta. Public university at Saginaw Valley State University, where I received my undergrad and grad degrees. And I intend to represent the 97th district. I come from a very large family. My father taught high school here in Vassar. We also farmed during the summer months. There were 9 kids altogether, 7 siblings and 2 cousins that grew up with us too, that I consider my brother and sister. So it was a very large family. We learned very early the value of hard work, discipline, timeliness. And both of my parents were very civically minded. They served on the city council. My dad was a mayor. They were involved with several community groups and kind of led the way for us kids to do the exact same thing. So here I am. I've represented children and families in the state of Michigan for the last 30 years. I'm a police officer and have been for over 31 years. So I've advocated for people my entire life, and I intend to continue that practice as a state representative.
With roots then, obviously, in that district, as you've now had a chance to go out into the broader area of what is now District 97, the issues that you felt were important coming in and what the voters are telling you on the doorsteps as to the top 1 or 2 issues that you face in this campaign.
You know, it was employment. So I do go and speak to a lot of people throughout the entire district, and folks really are interested to know how this economy is going to affect them and how it affects them and their children. And I got to say, David, regardless of whatever the most popular national news is, that's the thing that folks talk about the most. How is the economy going to affect them? How are business practices going to affect them in employment? I'll get back to employment because it's important for us to know that we still seem to have an issue finding enough people to fill the positions and then finding the right salaries to meet the needs out there for our employers.
Quite a shift across all of the states. So what you're saying is common amongst many of the guests we've had, that post, not completely, but coming out of COVID-19 and the pandemic, that the economic shape, the type of jobs, the amount of workforce available, the work from home, all of these factors impacting the look of an economy in any given area. How do folks paint that picture for you in the 97th?
Concern primarily for their children, concern for the future, that one, we're going to emerge from this global pandemic in a manner that's going to allow them to continue the life that they've known from 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. So that seems to be the emphasis to me, that folks are interested to know how is it that my kids can find a job and employment and education here in Michigan, here in mid-Michigan in the 97th, and be successful from there.
Do they feel that it's the number of people now working from home or a population loss where you're now finding some businesses not accessible at all and others, as you had mentioned, struggling to find workers, or we expand that to even include the training for workers to do certain types of jobs? And what are your proposals to address that?
I think it's primarily the availability of employment and what type of employment that's going to look like. So with population, there's a huge emphasis too. At least I've been hearing from folks and talking to people about the population shift in that there's a lot of the baby boomers right now and how that's going to affect our economy, how that's going to affect future school districts, how that's going to affect our economy.
As to then the types of jobs, the availability of jobs, or stabilizing an economic framework, how do you find District 97 and the areas you hope to represent in terms of being receptive to, willing to, and really able to restart businesses, bring in new businesses, retain workers, and those types of issues and concerns?
I think the 97th is uniquely poised to do an amazing job with the economy and with employment. So it's a diverse district. We have very rural areas, and then yet we have one of the most visited areas in the state of Michigan with Frankenmuth, and some our university at Saginaw Valley State University, our Delta College, our international airport in Freeland. We're uniquely positioned, I think, in the 97th to handle any type of job needs and wants and opportunities for young people.
Do voters tell you that the conditions, because we hear this at least from a national perspective, that there is a great level of concern over right now high costs, the level of inflation. Are they identifying that strictly as something Washington needs to fix, or do they feel, and are they giving you input, or do you have ideas of how we might address some of these concerns at the state level?
Well, part of it is the federal level itself. The other part, though, is how, as a state representative, how we're going to spend those federal dollars and how we're going to focus our attention. So, for instance, our transit situation here in Michigan. I've spoke to our transportation specialists who provide bus and other type of transportation to and from doctor's appointments and just general to and from. And there's definitely a need there. That's a good example of infrastructure work that we need to focus our attention on. And David, if I can also just speak about our child welfare system. I find it very important that we focus our attention and our state dollars from the federal government to child welfare. And from early learning through high school to include our foster care system and adoption, and how we're treating those kids in our public schools, in our public universities, and colleges. And that is going to set the stage for our future.
To date, then, as a candidate for this seat and then a voter and a citizen like all of us, you've seen how the current legislature, the current administration has dealt with, prioritized, committed to spending certain amounts of the surplus budget funds that we have coming from Washington from the pandemic. Do these stand then at the top of your list, infrastructure and child welfare? Are there other concerns where you would like to see those dollars targeted should you be elected, and proposals you would have?
I feel very strongly that Michigan is, again, poised to be in the forefront of our nation with regard to child welfare. We've had our issues. The Department of Health and Human Services has really done a good job lately of changing the way we do business here in Michigan with related to child welfare. With the Dobbs decision and with the proposal 3 on the ballot this year for Michigan, child welfare becomes a very forefront issue for all of us to talk about and be concerned about. In other words, I've heard this before, especially from some of the constituents here. Well, we'll just have more kids and they'll go into foster care. Someone will take care of them. And I have to tell you, I know about our foster care system here in Michigan or in general in the United States. And just simply saying a child should go into foster care isn't always the answer. And there's got to be a better answer for that. And I think we need to focus those dollars and resources to our the very beginning stages of our child welfare programs, and specifically for the population that's underserved here in Michigan.
Would you call that then a majority view that you noted and paraphrased into, well, if we, more kids, foster care, and is it reflecting then an overall mood or opinion level, if you will, on where folks stand post-Dobbs and perhaps the way a certain number of constituents may or may not vote on Prop 3?
Well, I don't know that much attention has been given to the afterthought of the Dobbs decision. So now with Prop 3, that's going to open up, potentially, it's going to open up some opportunity to have that discussion. And I think at least what I've been able to do as I go out and talk to folks and speak to groups is educate folks and educate them in what is going to happen with our population. What is that going to look like? And how are we going to be part of that solution as citizens, as potential parents, as potential foster parents or adoptions? And what is that going to look like? I think the biggest part, though, David, is providing that education and that level of unique expertise that I possess and I can bring to the table given my vast experience in the child welfare business over the last 30 years.
Which does kind of transition to where we wrap up our time with you, sir, and that if you take a look at all of the issues you've addressed, the concerns that you've heard from the voters, that final message you would want to leave with them as they get set to go out and cast their ballots in November.
Thank you, David. I may not have a lot of experience as a politician, and that's okay in my opinion. What I do bring to the table and what makes me uniquely different and uniquely qualified for this position is my vast experience in business, my vast experience advocating for children and families in the state of Michigan. I've stood up to legislators and senators, and I went to Lansing, and I advocated for those folks. As a police officer, I advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves. What I can bring to the table and what I will do is work with both sides. I intend to not represent simply Democrats or Republicans or independents or whomever. I intend to represent all of us. I've heard politicians say that before, but again, I think I'm in a great position to do just that. My campaign slogan is "A vote for Paul is a vote for all." And I truly believe that, and I think it's going to reflect in November when I win this race.
Well, we thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us and to those prospective voters in District 97. We wish you the best of luck with the rest of the campaign, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Paul Whitney as the Democratic candidate for Michigan House District 97. I'm David Nicholas. Thanks for joining us as well. And remember to go out and cast your vote on Tuesday, November 8th. All qualifying candidates were invited to participate in this series. Following the redraw of Michigan House, Michigan Senate, and congressional districts, check with local officials to make sure you are properly registered. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th.